Welcome back to Under the Hood Marketing, where we're breaking down what's actually driving your demand engine. So, on the last episode, I spoke about why most of today's marketing strategies are actually built backwards. Because most teams, they have more of a channel first mindset, and today's marketing just really doesn't work like that anymore. And so the best marketing strategies, they're not built around a channel, they're built around how attention moves. And that's going to be the bigger thing behind this series, because once we understand how people actually are discovering a brand, developing trust, and buying, everything starts to connect better. And what I want to do is I really want to explore this series through chapters, right? So just to give you a taste of what is to come. First, we're gonna go into like CTV, right? Connected TV is probably one of the more misunderstood channels of marketing. A lot of teams run CTV, they're expecting immediate results, right? Typically meaning like last click conversions, but then they wonder why the performance maybe is unclear. So CTV is not really about clicks. It's about creating just more demand, more momentum earlier in the customer journey. And when you think about it, if somebody sees your brand while watching, say, Hulu or ESPN, and then later on they search for you directly, and let's say they convert through another channel, that does not mean CTV failed. As a matter of fact, it means it probably worked. So we're going to break that down, looking at specifically why a lot of those campaigns might be underperforming, but also just how attribution can be misread often, and what's going to ultimately optimize and just make a stronger CTV strategy. And then from there, the next chapter is ABM. So account-based marketing, right? I think most ABM programs aren't failing because of bad targeting. I think they're failing because teams confuse targeting accounts with actually influencing buying groups. So just because you upload a list into LinkedIn, it doesn't mean you're running like a real ABM strategy. So we're going to pull back the lid there. Once again, just looking at like how ABM is scaling, how those channels should be working together, and how to measure success beyond what's marketing qualified. I also want to touch on more of like omni-channel marketing. I think that's huge because teams are still just operating way too much in segments, right? You have search over here, paid social there, events being handled somewhere else. But when you think about it from the buyer perspective, they're not experiencing your marketing in segments. They're experiencing your brand as part of one continuous journey. So I'll be breaking that down, thinking about how those channels influence each other, taking a look at attribution, understanding how to make more connected strategies instead of having these campaigns that get disjointed. I also want to jump into retargeting and conversions. When you think about traffic, right, most of it's not going to convert that first time. Most of your buyers, they're going to need multiple touch points before they ever take real action. So instead of trying to obsess about, okay, like how can we drive more traffic, create more demand, we'll get into what good retargeting actually looks like, and how to improve those conversions, and ultimately thinking about how brands are moving people from attention to action. And then, of course, we can't leave out digital out of home. I think this is probably one of the more overlooked channels, especially in today's marketing, because people are thinking in terms of like billboards, but the modern out of home experience is bigger than that, right? You think airports, think transit hubs, event centers, cityscapes. Now, if you combine that with like audience targeting, retargeting, good measurement, that's going to change the conversation completely. And last but not least, programmatic, right? It's probably a word that gets very overcomplicated in marketing. A lot of folks, they think they hear terms like DSP, bidding, inventory, and they just kind of check out. But programmatic is really just your infrastructure, right? It's going to be the engine behind your advertising. And so the goal here is really just looking at, one, how it actually works, what matters versus what doesn't, and just a way to kind of approach it in a more strategic way. And so throughout all of this, through these different chapters, like my goal once again is not to sell you on channels. It's really just to kind of help understand how today's marketing is actually working in tandem. Because once we stop thinking in silos, really I think we can begin to see why certain brands are growing more consistently, as opposed to just having to like chase behind these tactics. So that's it for today's episode. Until next time, keep your marketing engine running strong. I'll be back with more insights, more breakdowns, and more looks under the hood.